Subscribe to our YouTube channel and press the bell icon to get the latest updates.
I'm with Ambassador Navdeep Suri, Distinguished Fellow at the Observer Research Foundation, former ambassador to the UAE and Egypt, a very well-known diplomat. Ambassador Suri, welcome to ThePrint. And I'm also joined with Deepika Saraswat, Research Fellow at the ICWA, which is the Indian Council for World Affairs, who's somebody who's worked in Iran and West Asia. Both of you, welcome to ThePrint.
Thank you.
This, Ambassador Suri and Deepika, I'd like to say that this is a new series that we are starting at ThePrint called ThePrint Debates, where we will discuss the most important issue of the day, of the week. So today we are discussing this very important and very interesting peace agreement between the UAE and Israel, the first flight from, it's an El Al flight, which is taking off from Ben Gurion Airport in Tel Aviv and landing at Abu Dhabi on Monday, the August 31st, barely 2 weeks after the so-called historic agreement was signed between the two countries on the 13th of August. Ambassador Navdeep Suri, your first comments on this.
I think what it shows is that unlike the agreements with Egypt and Jordan, which kind of remained like cold peace agreements as they were called, here we are looking at a degree of warmth that was missing in the other two. And that is reflected in the speed with which these little steps about normalization of relations, you've spoken about the first flight. There's actually already been an exchange of a business delegation with senior officials. The Mossad chief has already made his first overt visit, a publicized visit, as opposed to the unpublicized visits that had taken place in the past. So I think there are enough indications to show that the peace agreement or the agreement between the UAE and Israel to normalize ties is going to be a substantive one. I already see reports that Israeli tech companies are looking at UAE sovereign funds and other entities for resources. And UAE likes to position itself at the cutting edge of new technologies. And so I think you're going to see a lot of interesting action taking place. The fact that UAE has a fairly efficient top-down hierarchical system means that decisions that are taken at the highest levels can be executed very quickly. And perhaps you're going to see evidence of that also.
So this is your old stomping ground, of course, Ambassador, but Deepika, you've been working in Iran. You know the region as well. You've written a book on Iran. Tell me, what do you think, how do you think Iran is going to respond to this new warmth that Ambassador Suri talks about?
First of all, let me say I'm in the process of writing my book. Okay. It would come out soon. Definitely from Iran, things look a bit more different. I mean, in fact, the reaction from Tehran has been quite animated. I mean, just in the beginning of the month, Foreign Minister Zarif and his UAE counterpart were actually having a video chat, you know, like, and it seemed like confidence building was, you know, moving in the right direction. And then a week later, we have this historic agreement. So for Iran, it's what the leader, what the president of Iran actually called dagger in the back. So from Iran, things look very dangerous, and the same is reflected in the reactions that are slowly trickling down from Tehran.
So dagger in the back is, that's quite an interesting phrase, a dagger in the back of the region, I would imagine, right, Deepika?
Dagger in the back is actually quite an interesting metaphor, I would say, because from Iran, I mean, the Palestinian issue, I mean, Iran has been leading the anti-Zionist resistance front for about 2 decades now. So for them, that's their claim to regional leadership, and of course these Arab Emirates, I mean Saudi Arabia and UAE to some extent, they've also claimed to support the Palestinian cause. So of course this is, for Tehran, this is a good opportunity to once again underline that it's only Tehran which remains the the true supporter of or the leader of the Palestinian struggle against the Zionist regime, as they call it.
Right. Navdeep, what do you make of this? And I'm going to ask you the same question, this phrase, the dagger in the back. I mean,
I think it's something that the spokesperson for President Mahmoud Abbas used something similar. He called it a betrayal. And certainly if
this
you
is the Palestinian president.
The Palestinian president, his spokesperson called it a betrayal, and similar words were used also subsequently by President Mahmoud Abbas. I think if you were a Palestinian, you would obviously feel aggrieved. But the fact, Jyoti, is that there is a new generation of leadership in the Gulf that is pragmatic, that is non-ideological, and maybe a bit like us, that doesn't see necessarily a contradiction between having relations with Israel and having relations with the Palestinians, or continuing to support the Palestinian cause, as indeed we have from India ourselves. There's also, the peace agreement, or the agreement, the announcement that came out on August 13th simultaneously from Abu Dhabi, Washington, and Tel Aviv,
right,
actually had two components. So I think it's really important to look at both of them and not just look at one. Because one was that UAE and Israel would establish normal ties, but the other was that Israel would agree to suspend its plans to extend its own sovereignty or annex certain Palestinian territories. And this is something that the Emiratis are taking to town. That look, I think the Minister of State for Foreign Affairs, Anwar Gargash, has said that there was a ticking time bomb of the annexation, and if we hadn't intervened, then the idea of a two-state solution would have been over. My own sense on this, and you might find it controversial, is that there have been trial balloons in the past about the validity of a two-state solution. Are we really today in 2020 at a point where a moth-eaten state in which, Palestinian state in which you've already got so many hundreds of Jewish settlements, can exist as a viable entity alongside Israel? Is that, I mean, many Palestinians would want it, many of the friends of Palestine would want it, but is it something that we actually see feasible?
right.
Or, as some Palestinians are arguing, and some other Arabs have started to argue, that are Palestinians better off seeking equal rights within one state? Not that those rights are on offer right now, and I think the Israeli right wing would have to be dragged and kicking and screaming to offer anything like a semblance of equal rights to the Palestinians. But I think there's new thinking underway, and certainly the Emiratis are quite happy to take that kind of thinking forward.
But explain to me this flight from El Al, which is going to land in Abu Dhabi, or has landed perhaps, has flown across Saudi airspace. Now, this is the first time that the Saudis have allowed an Israeli civilian airliner to fly across its airspace. So my question to you, Navdeep, is that surely the Saudis would have been on board. And if they are, and the Saudis and the Emiratis, perhaps amongst the best, the people in India, you're perhaps amongst the best people who know that. So if the Saudis and the Emiratis are on board, what do you make of that?
I wouldn't be surprised. After all, the Saudis also last year allowed an Air India flight to fly over Saudi territory on its way to Israel.
There's a slight difference between an Air India flight and an Israeli airline.
Yes, but I think the important thing for us is to look at trends rather than just events. The flight is an event, but the trends that you see moving towar's those events are fairly clear.
But does it signify that the Saudis are allowing something like this to happen? Are they on board?
Yeah, they've been very quiet in their opposition, if there were to be any. And the reason is the reason that they're not as vocal in support is that they still have to deal with a fairly conservative clergy within their own country. The Emiratis don't have any such handicaps that the Saudis face. And so the Emiratis can go out. And this has been a pattern where the Emiratis have been showing to the Saudis that, look, you can be actually quite a normal country, and women can drive, and concerts can happen, and films can be shown, and all of those things can happen, and the sky doesn't fall. and look at Dubai and look at Abu Dhabi and all of that. So the Saudis, you can see, are in a process of change themselves. While it may take some time for the Saudis to really come out as openly, but don't be surprised if the Bahrainis are in line or the Omanis are in line. After all, Muscat during Sultan Qaboos's time had received a surprise visit from Netanyahu. So there are these winds of change that are underway, and I think if we stick to old positions, then we are simply showing our refusal to acknowledge reality.
What do you make of this, Deepika? You know, Ambassador Suri is talking about this non-ideological, brave new world, you know, this picture that he's painting of West Asia. But Iran, which is a very important player in this region, is not, okay, it's not very happy. But what can Iran do? Does it just suck it up? What can it do?
I mean, I would say about this diplomatic agreement that just happened. I mean, it's a long trend that has been unfolding for quite some time, and there are very secular geopolitical reasons for it. I mean, which is that both Israel and Saudi Arabia and UAE, which have been working closely together in wider region as well. They both, I mean, both sides actually converge on the perception of Iranian threat. So it's from that though UAE has taken the lead, but Saudi Arabia is obviously backing this decision. They may not come out in the open, but even they have no covert and not so covert relations with Tel Aviv.
But what does it do to Iran? Does it, you know, does Iran feel cornered? In any case, it's very poor shape because of the sanctions.
I'm coming to that. For Iran, it's absolutely alarming because Iran's this whole anti-Israeli trend has been about making sure that Arabs and Israelis they don't come together. I mean, or to put it another way, that the US, which has been the dominant power in the region, has been trying to create a picture that Iran is the only threat in the region, not Israeli. So of course, Iran has, over the decades, it has been the main champion of this anti-Israeli resistance for the same reason that it does not want to be seen as the only threat that the Arabs and Israelis are united against. So for Iran, it's an alarming development.
But Navdeep, tell me, the Americans who have brokered this agreement, Donald Trump, is facing a re-election 2 months down the line. Now, whether or not he wins or loses, what does this mean for America's role in the Middle East? Or West Asia, India calls it. Yeah.
I think it's a nice gift delivered by UAE and Israel to the Trump campaign. The fact that the announcement came a week before the Democratic election, National Convention, and thereafter the Republican National Convention, means that the Trump administration could finally go to its supporters, and mind you, not just the strong Jewish lobby, but also the equally strong evangelist lobby in the US, and say, look, I've delivered to you something that no previous administration has been able to deliver. Here's an agreement between Israel and a very prominent Arab country, and use it for what it's worth in the re-election campaign. And the significance of this was also evident in the fact that with great alacrity, the Biden campaign had to respond. They almost scrambled to quickly issue a statement, which also welcomed the agreement, and actually saluted the Emiratis for showing the courage to sign that agreement. So you can see how this plays very neatly into the US political season in a manner that Trump will certainly try to take advantage of it. I'm not saying that this is going to be a decisive element one way or the other, but certainly it feeds nicely into his campaign. So, you know, for diplomats like us watching this this region, because there was so much going on under the radar, the question of ties was kind of more a question of when rather than if.
What do you mean? You're saying it was going on for a while? Is that what you're saying? I mean, obviously it's not going to happen overnight, but.
I mean, if you just look at what happened in 2020, right? And I'll take 2 minutes on this.
Sure.
In January 2020, Trump and Kushner present their vision for peace and prosperity in terms of their so-called Palestinian peace plan.
Right.
The event in White House is attended by the UAE ambassador along with the Bahraini and Omani ambassador. Thereafter, you have extensive back-channel discussions taking place in Washington. And they seem to be on track to do something important until Netanyahu drops the bomb by saying, if the Palestinians don't come on board, I will unilaterally annex the territories that are earmarked in that so-called map that was presented by the Americans. The Emirati ambassador in Washington, Yusuf al-Otaiba, who's quite a hyper-influential character, actually writes an op-ed in Yediot Ahronot, Israel's largest-selling Hebrew newspaper, to say that if this annexation is a really bad idea, and if you want normalization of relations, then this is not the way to go. And also holds out the carrots of what normalization means. And one of the things he said in that op-ed in June was direct flights. So you can see some of that playing out today, 2 or 3 months later. But as I said, you could read those tea leaves over the last few months. The timing of this, the way it has happened, I think fits nicely into the American political season.
Right. I mean, whether or not, Trump wins this election, despite this sort of gift wrapped to him in the shape of a Middle East peace agreement. Your last thoughts, both of you, Deepika, you first. What does this mean for India?
For India, I think that comment should be directed to Ambassador Suri.
I'll ask him, but I want to know what you think.
I would say something about Iran, actually. I mean, Ambassador Suri was just saying the timing of the agreement. There is another parallel factor to it, I would say, which is that like earlier in January, when there was so much of tensions in the Persian Gulf, and it was UAE which felt acute insecurity. It's shipping, and they were like, I mean, in case of an escalation between Iran and the US, then it was UAE which was bound to be a target. So there was an acute insecurity. But then we see then Israel has been, targeting Iranian targets in Syria, Iraq. There have been whole series of these what do you call those covert cyber attacks. So you see, there is a convergence.
No, but tell me. So sorry to interrupt you, but tell me something. The Indians have welcomed this agreement, right? Now,
yes, absolutely.
Yeah. So if India has welcomed it, Iran is, you're saying, feeling cornered. Now, does this mean that relations between India and Iran, which are already not on a very good footing because of the oil sanctions or because of Chabahar, we've shut down the railway line that that was supposed to connect Bandar Abbas to the north? Does this mean that relations will become even worse?
I would not say that it would become an important factor, because Tehran already has already understands how New Delhi positions itself in the region. I mean, and it's not just New Delhi. There are other great powers. I mean, China and Russia. Russia has equally good relations with Iran, Israel, and Saudi Arabia. So that ways, I mean, there is an understanding of how great powers or the rising powers are positioning themselves in the region. So I do not see that this additional, this is going to be an additional cause of for the sliding of relations between Tehran and New Delhi. I do not think that this would be a factor.
Ambassador Suri, what do you think?
So allow me to make just 3 points. On Iran, I don't think we owe them any favors on this. Look at the mega deal that they are signing with the Chinese to develop alternate ports infrastructure, and the way that they are treating the whole Chabahar project after all of these years, or indeed the glacial speed at which the Fars oil fields negotiations have proceeded over the last decade or more. Second, I think our friends in Pakistan are going to be even more distressed by this agreement, because they are putting themselves in the Iran and Turkey camp, and will feel probably even more isolated by these developments, where they will have to either re-evaluate their positions, but to the extent that in their twisted minds, Palestine and Kashmir are all part of one playbook, it complicates the situation for them. For India, the fact is that Israel and UAE are our two strongest friends in the region. They are the two countries that have consistently stood by us over the last few years. Israel, whether it comes to defense technology or armaments, UAE, whether when it came to political support, not just on Kashmir, but also in the OIC, etc. So when two of our close friends, our best friends in the region come together, I think that augurs well for us. It opens greater space for us in terms of collaboration on a whole range of issues. And don't be surprised if you see that emerging. The fact is that the day after, on August 14, both the UAE foreign minister and the Israeli foreign minister called Minister Jaishankar, and he then issued the statement welcoming the agreement. So please, as India, we should welcome it, and I think it bodes well for us.
But just one last question to you, Ambassador Suri. What was it? I mean, how did the penny drop? You said this peace agreement had been in the works for a while. But what is it that happened? I mean, they have been at daggers drawn. You know, you said under the radar, there was a lot that was going on. The Mossad.
I don't think so, Jyoti. I don't think the Emiratis have been saying anything hostile about the Israelis for a while. Over the last couple of years.
But why not? I mean,
because one is, you know, they as I said, because they are being non-ideological, because they are being pragmatic, because they recognize the new realities, and they probably see that there are different ways to address the Palestinian issue. The Palestinian leadership had opportunities from Camp David onwards, and none of those fructified into a Palestinian state. Today, there's a reality on the ground that is, you know, manifest, including to many Palestinians, and so they are quite clear in seeing that maybe we need to take a different track rather than be stuck at the same place. I want to just add one final point, Jyoti, which is that UAE itself has been in the process of change. They have been putting out this message of tolerance. Earlier in 2019, you had the Pope and the Grand Sheikh of Al-Azhar in Abu Dhabi for this grand document of human fraternity.
Right.
They announced this House of Abrahamic Faiths, where in one compound in Abu Dhabi, you're going to have a synagogue, a mosque, and a church. You got the first rabbi in Dubai catering to the spiritual needs of the Jewish community in Dubai, and a kosher shop, a kosher restaurant. So you know, you could see that this is part of UAE's own coming out, that we are a tolerant society, and build this narrative that, you know, you don't have to be afraid of the Jewish community, or create this greater acceptance of Israel. So you know, I see this as a progression. As recently, I think, as May this year or April, last year, you had a visit by the Israeli Minister of Youth and Sports to Abu Dhabi. She came for a judo tournament, and when the Israeli judo player won, the Israeli national anthem was played for the first time in an Abu Dhabi stadium. And then this lady goes on a very publicized visit to the Grand Mosque of Sheikh Zayed and signs in the visitors book in Hebrew. You know, and the fact is not that it happened, but the fact that the Emirati press is talking about it, writing about it, means that there was all of this building up. That's why I say that, to me, it comes as no surprise.
So not for nothing has this been called the Abraham Accords, but really the map of the Middle East, or West Asia as we call it here, is being reshaped. And thank you so much for your time, Ambassador Navdeep Suri. Thank you so much, Deepika Saraswat. This is the Print Debates. You're watching The Print. Please don't forget to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Tell us what you think, and we hope to chat with you again very soon. Thank you again.